Euranet Plus Panorama is a weekly review of European news broadcast by our network of EU radio stations.
Welcome back. Election night has been and gone, with signs of relief, even celebrations in certain quarters, and a wailing and gnashing of teeth in others. But how much has really changed? Although many of the headlines focus on the more attention-grabbing results, especially the drama that played out in France and Germany, where far-right parties saw unprecedented success, the overall picture is more nuanced. Mitja Shaga is a professor at the Institute for Ethnic Studies in Ljubljana. In an interview with our colleagues at RTV Slovenia, he shares his top 3 takeaways from this latest exercise in European democracy.
This European election will probably be best remembered for the fact that there has indeed been a certain shift to the right, but this shift is actually slightly smaller than some projections had previously predicted. What I will also remember is that, in most countries, it was domestic political issues that dominated rather than the traditional, and for Europe, most important issues that will actually determine its future. These are probably the 2 most significant characteristics. The third is that elsewhere in Europe, just like in Slovenia, it is clear that these new social media and social networking activities are also increasingly a factor, and they have had an impact on the election results themselves.
Ki so vplivale tudi na same volilne rezultate.
As Shagar points out, the radical shift to the right in certain countries does not change the fact that overall the centre-right European People's Party remains the big hitter in the parliament. The EPP even improved its position on last time, now counting 189 of the 720 elected members. This said, it cannot achieve anything on its own. But if it joins forces with the centre-left Socialists and Democrats group and with Renew Europe, together they will still hold a comfortable majority. With 135 seats, the S&D group remains the number 2 force by some margin. This gives it considerable clout, as Elly Schlein, former MEP and current secretary of Italy's Democratic Party, explains to Radio 24.
The European Socialist Party has held up, which was our goal. There is no majority possible in the European Parliament without the S&D group. We are even more committed to building, from tomorrow, an alternative to the right-wingers, both in Europe and in Italy.
Irache Garcia Perez, a sitting Spanish S&D member, clarifies that her group is ready to form a pro-European majority on the condition that far-right parties are not part of the deal. Her comments are shared by Luxembourg's national broadcaster 100.7.
We are open to build a good alliance with all pro-European political forces. I want to insist on it. My political group, it was clear during the campaign and we continue with this line. We are open to discuss with all pro-European political forces, never with the extreme right.
Despite its decimation in France, Renew Europe remains the 3rd force with 80 seats. But the potential exclusion of the Dutch VVD over domestic political links with a far-right group could further reduce its numbers. In fact, it's not inconceivable that Renew could be overtaken by the nationalist European Conservatives and Reformists group, spearheaded by Giorgia Meloni's far-right Brothers of Italy, if some of the almost 100 non-attached MEPs join its ranks. Several heavyweights are also currently without a family, including Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's Fidesz party, which was expelled from the EPP. After Renew Europe, the Greens EFA group was the next hardest hit, losing a total of 18 seats. They will certainly have suffered from popular opinion turning against some of the harder-to-swallow elements of the Green Deal. Karina Stasiuk-Krajewska, a media expert at Warsaw's SWPS University, believes that disinformation and its social media vectors had a role to play in the swing that has taken place in the European Parliament. Polski Radio shares her comments.
Disinformation preys on our fears. It preys on the divide. Us them, us foreigners. Someone is going to take something away from us. There is a kind of conspiracy theory, the idea that someone wants to harm us. So, generally, disinformation intensifies conflict. Disinformation and fear. And it is in this context that you can very clearly see in these election results that the groups that strongly communicate this kind of worldview have made significant gains.
Mocno w tych wyborach zyskały.
Italian PM Giorgia Meloni was really the cat that got the cream on the 9th of June, with her party winning some 29% of her country's EU vote. This translates to 24 seats in the European Parliament, 4 times more than in 2019. Meloni had framed the European elections as a vote of confidence in her as Italy's head of government, and her gamble resoundingly paid off. Yet while the election results certainly make her one of the strongest leaders in the EU, her plan to shift the majority in the EU by forming a de facto coalition between the so-called centre-right EPP, sovereignist right ECR and extreme right ID has failed. The 3 groups still do not command a majority of seats between them. And it's unlikely they will be able to join forces with the centre-right EPP anyway, whose lead candidate, Ursula von der Leyen, looks to be a shoo-in for another term as Commission President. VDL wants to repeat the EPP's centrist coalition with the Socialists and Liberals, and they, in turn, have stressed that any move towards Meloni would be a red line for them in coalition talks. Some fear that the Italian Prime Minister may now look to lead a single large group of sovereignists and far-right extremists, including Germany's AfD. Others worry that she could form a more limited alliance with Marine Le Pen and Viktor Orban. Iulian Chifu, president of Romanian Research Institute, the Centre for Conflict Prevention and Early Warning, tells Radio Romania that there is unlikely to be a sharp rise in power of the far right, since there is little unity among the groups that sit to the right of the EPP.
Now, it must be said very clearly, there is no unity on the far right. There we have both Eurosceptic and anti-European parties. The Eurosceptics do indeed want, if not the return of a Europe of nations, then a return of decisions back home. At least not an acceleration or an increase in the centralism of European federalism. And the anti-Europeans want the dismantling of the European Union, of the common market, of all institutions.
The latest rumour concerns the imminent entry of Fidesz into the ECR group in the European Parliament, as requested by Orban. But other ECR members are ready to pack their bags, heading potentially to the EPP if the door is opened to the pro-Russian Hungarian leader. The big shock of the European elections is the rise of France's National Rally Party, or Rassemblement National, which gained over 31% of the national vote and almost 40% of the country's seats in the European Parliament. BNR asks Alexander Levy, a French journalist born in Bulgaria, about the significance of the mass public backing the National Rally received in the European elections.
For the first time, a European election is turning the political tide in France. Until now, to tell you the truth, EU elections in countries like France have not been of huge interest to voters, nor to these parties themselves, which have traditionally kept their people away, in a sense, to keep them away from the political scene altogether.
Yet despite this resounding victory, it's not clear whether the National Rally's 30 MEPs, who sit in the extreme right Identity and Democracy group, will have any teeth. A cordon sanitaire is likely to be set up by the other groups to marginalise Jordan Bardella and Marine Le Pen's party, and their recent ousting of Germany's AfD party from the ID group will further weaken their position. A party, incidentally, that has also enjoyed significant success this past week. Frédéric Béraud, specialist in European law and vice president of the University of Strasbourg, sums up the National Rally's rather tricky position in an election night discussion with France's EU radio.
Qu'est-ce qu'ils viendront faire au Parlement européen? C'est-à-dire avec qui?
What are they going to do in the European Parliament? In other words, who are they going to ally themselves with? Because even if Jordan Bardella, number 1 on the National Rally list, was very strongly backed, he can't do anything on his own as a member of the European Parliament. But during the campaign, Jordan Bardella said he no longer wanted to sit alongside the AfD. And we've just seen the AfD doing rather well in Germany. So what's going to happen?
Au niveau de l'Allemagne. Alors, du coup, qu'est-ce qui va se passer?
The National Rally seeks an alliance with Giorgia Meloni in the ECR. However, the Italian PM will be reluctant to shoot herself in the foot in the council by consorting with a bunch of pro-Russian MEPs in the parliament. European leaders will now move quickly to designate and invest the next European Commission chief and team. Von der Leyen has less than 2 weeks, and some suggest just a matter of days, to convince the council members to choose her and, above all, to secure majority support in the new European Parliament. EU observers suggest that the bloc's top team is more or less a done deal already, with VDL tipped for Commission President, Portugal's former Prime Minister Antonio Costa for President of the Council, Roberta Metsola continuing in post at the Parliament, and Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas taking over the role of High Representative. Not much further down the road, the EU institutions will have to take several fundamental decisions if they are to keep the world's third largest economic space competitive. Newly elected Lithuanian MEP Paulius Saudargas, who joins the EPP group, considers support for Ukraine and Europe's defence industry the main priorities. He's talking to Žinių Radijas.
My primary focus is support for Ukraine, not only military and humanitarian support, but also the Euro integration support they need by sharing Lithuania's accession experience and offering diplomatic and political backing in the corridors of Brussels and Strasbourg. Another aspect is the Lithuanian and European defence industry. Lithuanian companies with European support need to concentrate on enhancing Europe's defence capabilities as much as possible. The European Commission is interested in this and has taken the relevant decisions, and the European Parliament can also promote this process. We will be stronger if we boost the defence industry.
But Estonian economist Raul Eamets cautions that everything the EU needs to do requires money. He tells Kuku Radio that there was not much talk about the economy during the elections, but the gap between the EU and the US has been steadily widening.
Kuumad teemad, rohepööre ja julgeolek, need on need, mis valijaid nagu kõnetavad, aga
the hot topics, the green transition and security, are the ones that resonate with voters. But if we look at the numbers and think about the fact that this green transition, the development of the defence industry, digitalisation and support for our own industry, all of these require a great deal of money. This is a real issue that the European Parliament needs to address. Where does the money come from? How much do we need to invest to make up for the huge backlog? If the difference in GDP between the US and the EU was around 5% 20 years ago, today it is 20%. In other words, we are lagging behind by some 3.2 trillion euros, which is already a lot. And frankly, if we look at the trend, the gap is growing. If we don't act by 2050, the gap will be 40%. America is quietly pulling away.
Kui me midagi ette ei võta, on juba 40%, ehk Ameerika läheb eest ära vaikselt.
So there's a lot to reflect on as the dust settles after polling day and political parties and groups scramble to cement their respective positions. Over the coming weeks, things should become clearer, so watch this space. Thanks for joining us for this first post-election panorama. Make sure you come back next week for further analysis from around the Euranet Plus network.